I work with a lot of writers each year, both as private clients and in my group coaching program, Powerful Writers Magical Novels. And here's one of the most important things I know to be true. Writing a novel is a roller coaster of emotions, of successes and failures, of good days and terrible days. And writers typically don't have the luxury of long, lazy hours to do their work. Instead, they try to squeeze a few words in here and there while dealing with screaming children, barking dogs, friends who need attention, demanding jobs, and the monumental stress of politics. And because of those realities, it is so easy to develop writer's block and never finish your manuscript. That's why in today's episode, we are going to talk about the 9 tricks that you can use to limit writer's block and get back into your creative flow fast. Hello and welcome to the Speculative Fiction Writing Made Simple podcast. I'm your host, Heather Davis. I'm a book coach, developmental editor, and fellow storyteller. And this is the show that's all about how to brainstorm, write, edit, publish, and sell a powerful speculative fiction novel, and maybe just change the world too. About a year ago, a writer, let's call her Margot, came to me with the first 150 pages of her novel, asking if I could help coach her through the second half. You see, Margot had gotten all the way to the midpoint of her story, a very exciting scene that she had been particularly proud of, when suddenly writer's block had struck her like a fever. She just couldn't write a single word, and she had no idea what the problem was. I'd like to say that this is a rare problem for writers, but unfortunately, it's all too common. So today I want to offer you the 9 tricks that have helped me overcome writer's block in the past. These are also the very same tricks that I used to help Margot get back on track and finish a novel she was very, very proud of. Okay, let's dive in. The first trick is to take the pressure off of your writing and let it be joyful again. Sometimes we have these really big dreams about what our writing is going to do for our lives. We dream that we'll be able to quit our day jobs and retire from working for the man and basically spend our days writing for about 5 hours while answering fan mail. But when we put that much pressure on our writing, it ends up becoming a means to an end, and then we get frustrated when that end feels so far away. But here's the thing. Those types of external rewards are very, very unlikely to happen, even if your novel is incredibly successful. So sure, we want to write the very best book we are capable of writing. We want to be incredibly proud of our work when we're finished. But nothing else is within our power to control. So we need to let go of those external rewards and accolades as much as possible. We need to remember that there's no rush in finishing our novel because writing a great novel is not a means to an end. The whole point of writing is that writing is supposed to be joyful, and it's supposed to be the deepest reflection of ourselves and what we believe. So I challenge you to stop thinking about what will happen when you're done writing your novel and start thinking about the wonder and joy of the actual process of creating the thing. This one little shift might be enough to ward off writer's block. The second trick is to understand that when we get stuck, it's usually because there is something about the story that we just don't understand yet. Look, I see this happen to writers over and over again, and interestingly, when I myself feel writer's block creeping in, this is usually the problem, even if I don't realize it at first. Let me explain. Regardless of whether you're a plotter or a discovery writer, there usually comes a point when the story becomes a little muddy and you don't know exactly where things are headed. Maybe it's a big plot problem, like you don't know what's motivating your protagonist to make key decisions in the story. Or maybe you don't know how the story ends. Or maybe you just can't figure out your protagonist's motivation in a particular scene. Or maybe you're confused about how a particular fight scene is logistically going to play out. When this happens, writers often blame writer's block because they feel stuck and unable to move forward. But it's not really writer's block at all. They just need to take some time to understand exactly where their novel is headed and find clarity around key events in their novel. So, if you realize that your writer's block is stemming from just not understanding some aspect of your novel well enough, my advice to you is to take out a notebook and brainstorm. Let me give you an example. Let's say you've written your novel all the way up to the midpoint like Margot, and you have no idea what's going to happen next. Just start writing down what I call your maybe list. Maybe this will happen. Maybe that will happen. Maybe this other thing will happen. Don't limit yourself and don't judge yourself. Just write down whatever pops into your head, no matter how silly or far-fetched. Eventually, you will get to something that sparks your interest and feels like it might have legs. The third trick is to figure out the point of the novel you're writing. The most foundational layer of every novel is the point. What's a point, you ask? Well, if you've been listening to this podcast for any amount of time, you already know. But if you're new to the show, the point is the big message, lesson, or theme of your work. It's the thing you want readers to walk away understanding about people or about the world. But the problem is, many times writers dive into writing their novel without really understanding their point. They think that if they're not writing a kid's book, then their work doesn't really need a point. But here's the thing. All novels need a point because it's the solid bedrock that the rest of the novel is built on. It's where the writer goes to figure out the character arc of their protagonist and where they go to decide on the plot level events of their novel. And because of its central importance, not knowing the point of your novel often leads to not knowing the direction of your novel, which inevitably leads to writer's block. So I challenge you to go out and find the point of your novel in order to figure out things like the character arc of your protagonist, their motivations, and the plot. If you're still not exactly sure what a point is or how the heck to craft one, no problem. I've got you covered. Just head on over to episode 1 of my podcast and start listening. In that episode, I deep dive into the point and I give you a very snazzy workbook that will take you through developing your novel's point step by step. And don't worry, I've dropped the link to that episode and the workbook right in the show notes of this episode, so it will be super simple for you to snag those. The fourth trick is to go get some sleep. I know. This sounds ridiculously simple and even a little inane, but hear me out. Most of us are working writers, which means we have a day job that gets us up early and comes with all kinds of demands and stresses that keep us busy and on edge for significant portions of the day. And by the time we get around to actually writing, we feel like completely exhausted husks of human beings. And let me tell you something, my friend, creativity and exhaustion are not friends. So, if you're tired when you sit down to write, I challenge you to go take a nap first and then get back up later, get yourself a glass of water or a mug of hot coffee, and set to work refreshed and better able to concentrate on your novel. Honestly, even a 20-minute nap is enough to make a world of difference. The fifth trick is to go for a long walk outside or do some other outdoor exercise that relaxes your mind. Stressed out minds do not flow with creativity. They get stuck under worry and anxiety, and they end up creatively paralyzed. The best way to limit the effects of stress is to flood your brain with the endorphins of rejuvenating exercise. And if you go for a long walk outside, you get not only the exercise itself, but you also get the fresh air and the space and the sunshine. These things alone can settle your brain enough that the creativity will be able to trickle back in. The sixth trick is to read a book that inspires you to create. For me, this trick is key. When I feel writer's block set in, I immediately know that I've not been feeding the part of my brain that needs to get lost in the beauty of words. The part of my brain that knows I need to feel humbled by the music of prose that make me think and feel deeply. One of my go-to books for waking up my creative energy is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. It's a nonfiction book that delves deep into Gilbert's beliefs about creativity and how we should interact with our own creativity and how we should regard inspiration. If you haven't read this book before, I highly suggest you find it and gobble it up immediately. It really changed my perspective on my own creative endeavors, and I read it faithfully about once a year just to keep me grounded and in awe of my own creativity. But along with this wonderful nonfiction book, I also go out and hunt for a novel that seduces me, one that makes me fall in love with its words and its characters and its story. Most recently, that book has been The Little Liar by Mitch Albom. Before that, it was The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. And before that, it was Babel by R.F. Kuang. But here's the thing. Your list doesn't have to be my list. It can be any novel that makes you think, wow, I want to write something that perfect. Anything that causes your creative soul to get restless and ready to make something of your own. So I challenge you to go find a novel that lights you up and dive in. The seventh trick is to create a writing habit and begin to consistently put words on the digital page, even if you think they suck. This is so important. In order to stay connected to your story and to the craft of writing, you simply must take time to write every day. Writing every day is like creative lubricant. It keeps the words flowing, and it's one of the very best defenses against writer's block. But let's be real, okay? I'm not saying this is going to be easy. I know from personal experience that it's not. But you have to do it if you want to be an author. It's as simple as that. And there is some good news about the idea of writing every day. You do not have to set aside an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours every day. I know that's not doable for most writers. But if you can set aside even 10 minutes every day, you will make progress on your project. And best of all, it will help thwart writer's block. I promise. The eighth trick is to be gentle with yourself. Sometimes writer's block comes from a nasty condition called perfectionism. Perfectionism is, of course, when a writer looks at their work and says things like, "This is garbage. I should never have bothered to write. I'm just not talented. Delete, delete, delete." This kind of perfectionism and negative self-talk often comes when writers compare their fragile little work in progress with somebody else's thrice edited New York Times bestseller. And then that writer recognizes naturally that theirs comes up a little short in that comparison. Well, of course it does. The New York Times bestseller is already a grown-up novel ready to be out there on its own. Yours is just a little baby taking its first tentative steps. So do yourself a favor and stop self-sabotaging. Stop wallowing in perfectionism. Stop the negative self-talk. It doesn't help you, but it can, and often does, lead to an unfinished manuscript and an unrealized dream. So instead of letting your mean inner critic loose on your poor little novel, instead say, "Wow, this is a really good start. I made progress today. If I just keep writing and keep learning my craft, one day this novel will be something I am truly proud of." The ninth trick is to find a writing community. Join a good critique group, join a group coaching program, or hire a book coach for private coaching. Why? Because community and accountability and expert feedback are key to having the emotional fortitude to face the ups and downs of finishing your manuscript. Yep, that's right. That image of a writer alone at a keyboard bleeding should be a thing of the past. Because for most writers, it just doesn't work. Writer's block eventually sets in and sabotages everything. But a writing community can change that. Your writing community can help you stay motivated just by being in the presence of others who are serious about the craft and talking about their own work. They can help you learn the skills and techniques necessary to write a great novel by giving you much needed feedback. And most importantly, they can provide the pivotal accountability that you need to sit down and produce pages, because guess what? They are waiting for your work. Okay, writers, I hope this episode was super helpful. If it was, please take a moment to follow the show and share it with a writer you really care about. Until next time, keep writing, keep dreaming, and remember, the world needs your stories right now, so don't you dare give up on your novel or yourself. Talk soon.